Well, welcome everyone. This is Tom Judd. I have the privilege of chairing the IFMBE Clinical Engineering Division, putting on our webinar today. I assume all can hear me. And just a couple of brief items as we introduce. First of all, this is our first monthly webinar in 2020, and we'll have them every month on the fourth Thursdays at 11 a.m. New York time. And hopefully, of course, the recordings will be able to be used all around the world, as this may not work for everybody, the time. We're delighted that over 300 folks, colleagues, signed up to attend today. And we've got two wonderful, young, experienced clinical engineers presenting. When I was 29, I'd been in the Navy and started out my clinical engineering career. These guys have a full resume already by the time they were 29, so this is going to be fun. Take it away, Luis and Jennifer.
Thank you very much, Tom. Glad to hear those words of introduction. I'm here today with my friend Jennifer to talk to you about a really, really important subject called HTM Indicators and Stakeholder Management, which is something that we've been talking for a while about how we should measure the efforts of the clinical engineering department and clinical engineering as well. And also, not only which indicators should we be producing, but also how should we interpreting those results and those metrics to the people that want to hear it. So briefly, I will introduce my colleague here, Jennifer, which is a really talented biomedical engineer. She was named 2019 headliner for Women's to Watch in 2019 Beyond by BIS Women. She's AME Young Professional for 2016, Technicians Professional of the Year of 2016, and Resident Regional Director of Health Technology Services, Compass One Healthcare at UC Health. So welcome, Jennifer, and take it away.
Thank you, Luis. I am really excited to be here with you all and talk about indicators, and I'm so thrilled that we're starting off the beginning of our webinar series as well with so many of you from across the world. So welcome and thank you so much. I'm going to briefly introduce, hold on, sorry, I'm having a hard time moving this forward. Luis as well. So Luis is a man that needs no introduction, very talented entrepreneurial clinical engineer. He has a biomedical engineering and business background, and he is currently the CEO of a CMMS company and really doing a lot of amazing things in South America and beyond. And all of the content that IFMBE gives you on a daily basis, Luis is really the driving force behind that. So I'm very excited to be sharing with you. I'm going to be talking through indicators, and then Luis is really going to be hitting home with how we're integrating our stakeholders, and then we'll have time for question and answers in between. All right, so a little bit about HTM indicators. So really the precipice of this is one of the IFMBE CED's challenges with the World Health Organization. So this was challenge number 5 in 2019 that the CED group was working to establish. And the idea is that we're going to create recommendations for biomedical engineers, technicians, and other personnel for the type of equipment that a hospital has, how many beds they have, really thinking through a staffing model, essentially, as well as key indicators that will help us gauge what we're doing as a community and the importance of that. So one of the key considerations for this is obviously the stratification of information from high-income countries as well as low and middle-income countries. So there's a lot to consider as we pull all of these things together. Why is this important? Why is it important that we understand the capacity we need to build for clinical engineering moving forward? And why is it important that we need to look at these indicators and share them with others? I've included on the screen some resources from the IFMBE site, including a blog from Tom, the chair of the CED, which you heard give a quick introduction of our webinar series, as well as really our project charter of what this looks like and how we're tackling this problem as a global community and with IFMBE CED really driving. So the importance and the important drivers behind it from a WHO standpoint are really the Sustainable Development Goal 3, which many of you are familiar with, really health and well-being for all. That's why we're all here. That's why we all do what we do every day, driving health outcomes, making sure that equipment is safe for patients and available for them when they need it, to really support not only treatment, but proactive prevention. Also, the triple billion goals. Some of you may be slightly less familiar with this. This is really a newer goal from the World Health Organization. They have 3 goals that 1 billion people worldwide, you know, it's kind of a great grand goal, that 1 billion people will have greater access to care, have better health and well-being, and also are able to have a better quality of life. So all of this, clinical engineers and biomedical engineering technicians are really facilitators of this and making sure that providers have this equipment at the ready and that the right equipment's there so that we can address community health items. One of the other things is we really need to increase the evidence for the HTM community. Many of you were likely at the International Congress in Rome this past October, and 1,000 of us got together from 6 continents and probably 80+ countries, and we shared a lot of great information. But one of the things that we are not as good at, I guess, or we fail to do globally, is provide ourselves a platform where we can share our information and share our data with one another. So while a lot of us are doing amazing things in our scope or sphere of influence, we aren't bringing that all together. Obviously, the IFMBE has the Global Clinical Engineering Journal, which gives us that avenue. But one of the things that we also need to do within these indicators is provide some evidence behind what we do. Our clinical providers have to use evidence-based practices in what they do. So things that there's tangible evidence, if we do this and we do it in a reliable way, we will have this outcome. So that's one of the main goals of also getting these indicators out, is establishing clear metrics and clear evidence for what we can do, that we can proliferate and really share best practices and not have to reinvent the wheel regionally or in every country, but also be able to measure our impact and ultimately patient safety. For staffing, one of the big drivers behind this is Adriana's work with the International Labor Organization. So much of our data, as you guys mostly know, or it's available on the WHO website as well as IFMBE, there was a study done in 2018, which really drilled down to the country level. So countries were able to say how many biomedical engineering technicians they had, as well as clinical engineers. But what wasn't able to translate was, how does that translate to a single hospital or an organization? And how many biomedical engineering technicians and clinical engineers does a local hospital need to really run proficiently? So we need to build some evidence and build a body of practice around that so we can start to answer that question in a more granular way. And then also creation of indicators around CE. We really have a good body of evidence with the Book of Knowledge that IFMBE publishes, but also we need to dig down into these indicators to determine which ones are the most important for us globally, as well as the definitions behind them and how we're going to be able to mine that data. Okay, so some of you at this point may be saying, what is an HTM indicator? I'm hearing this word and I'm not quite sure what it means. So many of us have different words for this. We might call this a key performance indicator. We might call this a metric. We might call this a balanced scorecard. So really the idea is This is an indicator that we can use with a clearly defined way that we're reaching it, and that we can compare apples to apples programs, as well as regions, countries, and nationally, how each program is doing and the impact we're having. Some of these that you may be familiar with would be preventive maintenance completion, corrective maintenance completion, response time, time to initial intervention, as well as overall turnaround time of corrective maintenance work orders. If you're in maybe some of the more advanced or more mature programs, you may also be looking into your medical device server patching completion, number of cybersecurity threats, and items like that. So why are these useful? These really give us a great idea on a global level of how we're doing. It also provides an avenue and a platform for us to really change the way we're talking about clinical engineering globally. So many of you know that our field, of course, is the best kept secret in healthcare. So many people don't know what we do. It's also sometimes hard for us to translate our technological speak to an administrator or our leadership in our governments and at the ministries of health and really say, this is what we do, this is the impact we have. So by developing these indicators, we not only establish standards for ourselves, but we also establish a strong platform for which we're going to be able to communicate this globally. So with our local leadership, with our national leadership, and at the international level, at the WHO level. So how can you use these? I think probably everyone on this call has success stories of how they've used data and how they've used indicators to increase their resources or provide a solution to a specific problem in an innovative way within their healthcare organization. So again, we have a lot of these local stories. So whether it's we saved the hospital $200,000, or we intervened and we reduced our use errors by a certain amount, which made our equipment more available, or we increased our equipment uptime, to 99.2%. We have a lot of stories and anecdotes at the local as well as national level, but our goal is to get these out globally. So how do we create a success story around clinical engineering, providing evidence and documentation of it globally? So this is really where we need your help. So when I look at staffing, the primary, I'm going to split this into two parts. Staffing as then indicators in the traditional sense of metrics. And Adriana Velasquez from the WHO, she said something very interesting to me that's kind of stuck in my mind. She said, if you have a plane, whether it has 10 seats or 500 seats, you still need a pilot. And that's how we feel about biomedical engineering. So you might have a 10-bed hospital, but that still means you need a clinical engineering professional. You might have a 500-bed hospital and you may have different skill sets, but you still need clinical engineering professionals in that capacity to facilitate continuity of operations. So when I think of staffing, I think of my pilot and just that really our clinical engineering folks behind the scenes at the hospital are enablers and potentially sometimes the people driving those outcomes. So the top goal for this portion of the indicator project is to build an evidence-based model for clinical engineering staffing that can be stratified to not only the national level, but also the local level. We're predominantly looking at several models to address not only our high income countries, but also our low middle income countries, as well as other low resource areas. So as you all know, not every hospital is built the same. And nationally, we have quite a bit of variation in terms of scope of practice. So one of the things that we wanted to build into this model was the ability to have some autonomy and to account for those. Another sub-portion of the staffing is that we're going to look at certification and education. So in these countries, what type of education does the staff have? What type of certifications do they have? And really trying to establish minimum education certification, as well as potential recommendations for certification and education in conjunction with the staffing model. So I'm going to show you a quick screenshot and demo, and I just want to note that this is draft only. This is kind of our first initial concept of what this could look like. So please do not take this as gospel. We are still getting a lot of data together. So this is really just a working model at the moment. So again, please don't take this as gospel. So the idea of the options was to have potentially up to 3 different options for the staffing model with an algorithm to account for large hospitals. So these are likely going to be high income countries, large hospitals, very high dollar, high end equipment, and lots of equipment. The second option is really by number of devices. So this is going to be maybe a less intensive hospital or a medium to small size hospital that has a lot of pieces of equipment, but maybe doesn't have that high end equipment like a linear accelerator or CTs or MRIs, or may only have a handful of those types of devices. And then the third one is really most likely going to be for low resource areas, maybe rural, maybe low and middle income countries that has maybe a small bed count, but a lot of ambulatory visits where people are coming to get care and thinking through that. So essentially what we're attempting to do is create a department profile for local hospitals where you could input this data of your asset value, the number of devices you have, the number of network devices you have, since that's a growing and emerging part of our breadth and scope. So possibly also the number of resources you need that kind of have those hybrid information technology roles, as well as bed count and ambulatory visits. So the idea is that we have algorithms that create these staffing models where this would give you at a local level, once we drill down to it from the basically subnational level, that it would give you an idea of the number of staff you would need to service that particular type of hospital. And again, really we're building this data and building this information off of the evidence and the future work we're going to do, which I'm going to talk to you about in a few minutes, to really get a good recommendation for how we're going to move forward. So then moving on to more traditional indicators, we have a lot of types and importance. So one of the main things that we are doing with this is trying to determine what types of indicators are most important to us and how we want to move forward and prioritize those, again, to give us a global platform that if we were to consolidate and have these indicators, the ministries of health would be rolling these out to the World Health Organization. So again, these are going to be very important, and they're going to have to be scalable and usable and really defendable with data and analysis as we move forward. So we have a draft survey, which is honestly very much like the book of knowledge and possibly going through these. And the idea is that we would get a hospital profile, a department profile, which would pull in the staff you have and the mix as well as their credentials. And then we would really dig into indicators in several paradigms. So one would be safety. This is really going to be your PM completion, your corrective maintenance completion. Program performance would be really a whole look at how your program is performing in a wide range of items. financial performance, so how much it costs you to support your equipment versus other organizations, as well as the mix of service contracts and what the clinical engineers are doing on site. And then program maturity. So as we all grow and our programs grow with us, and as the needs of the healthcare environment change, we are being stretched into different ways of being and different things that we need to do. So thinking of a multiplier potentially in here for the additional items that some programs might be doing versus others. Another one that I talked through was interoperability and cybersecurity. So as you know, a growing and emerging part of what we're doing, as well as inventory management, how we're managing our inventory and making sure that we have an accurate count, as well as accurate preventive maintenance schedules and documentation of those, as well as any others. So there's also likely going to be other categories of indicators that we look at. So in terms of our indicator project, what are the next steps? We are working to create a white paper on current literature and available resources from peer-reviewed journals and other publications within the international context. We're evaluating our key collaborators, which hello, all of you guys are, and other key clinical engineering resources that could aid in our development of the project. And then what we want to do is create a draft survey tool that's going to kind of test on some of our collaborators. And we talked through this and had a presentation in Rome, but likely also having another discussion on this. And then what we really want to do is get the test survey data out, analyze it, and then possibly determine if there's amendments that are required. And then what we would like to do is put these surveys together, get them in front of you all, and with this data, not only collect it, but also prioritize with the IFMBE groups what's the most important. So at the end of this, what we really are looking to do is to create a report and recommendations for the HTM indicators to the World Health Organization, and not only provide this preliminary benchmarking data, but propose a potential staffing model algorithm, and then include future considerations for the indicators and research needed. So how can you help? I have included some links here, so you can go to our blog that talks all about this survey, and you can also take our survey, or currently our draft survey, so that will help us kind of polish up this tool. And then also what you can do on a continuous basis is publish your indicator data, publish your staffing data, all of the great things you're doing. Calroy is on, who is really the leader and editor behind the Journal of Clinical Engineering that IFMBE puts out. So definitely a plug for that. Make sure if you have this information, please submit it to that journal. And then also you can contribute to our indicators team and project.